When did your healing become another way to hide? Maybe it started innocently enough. You discovered meditation, affirmations, maybe a book that spoke of letting go, rising above, or choosing love over fear. And for the first time in a long time, something inside you relaxed. The ideas tasted clean, bright, promising. They made you feel like you finally had language for what you had always suspected, that you are more than this body, more than this story, more than this pain. So you grabbed onto spirituality like a lifeline. You started saying things like, everything happens for a reason. It's all love. I'm just going to focus on the positive. You tried to stay high vibe, to keep your thoughts pure, your emotions clean, your energy light. You decided that the old you, the hurting, angry, grieving, confused you, was something to transcend. You didn't realize it at first, but slowly, spirituality turned into your nicest, prettiest escape route. You began using higher truths the way other people use alcohol, work, or entertainment, not to face your pain, but to keep it at a distance. You say, I forgive, before you've actually felt how much it hurt. You say, it's all an illusion, before you've acknowledged how real the wound feels in your nervous system. You say, I'm past that, while your body still flinches at certain tones of voice and your heart still tightens at certain memories. On the outside, you look enlightened. On the inside, you're just as scared to feel as everyone else. This is the danger Alan Watts often hinted at, the temptation to turn spirituality into yet another ego game, a way to be better than your humanity, a way to be above it all, a way to avoid the rawness of being a limited, vulnerable creature who bleeds when cut and cries when abandoned. It's not that the ideas are wrong. Impermanence is real. Oneness is real. The dance of opposites, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, is real. But when you grab those ideas and use them like a shield against your own heart, they become poison. Notice how subtle it is. Something painful happens, someone betrays you, a relationship ends, a part of your life collapses. There is a very real, very human response that tries to rise: grief, anger, confusion, disappointment. And then your spiritual self rushes in like a security guard. Don't be angry, that's low vibration. Don't cry too much, you're just perpetuating the story. Don't feel like a victim, you're creating your reality. So you push it down. You sit to meditate, not to meet what's there, but to silence it. You repeat mantras like a sedative. You chase peak experiences, breathwork, plant medicine, ecstatic practices, anything that lifts you out of the heaviness, even if only for a moment. And for a while, it works. You feel light, clear, expanded. You have insights that shimmer through your mind like constellations. You talk about consciousness, karma, dimensions, timelines. You feel like you've escaped the ordinary suffering of unconscious people. But life is patient. The body remembers what the mind tries to bypass. The hurt you didn't feel doesn't disappear. It sinks. It moves into your muscles, your gut, your jaw, your sleep. The anger you never allowed yourself to express doesn't evaporate. It hardens into resentment, numbness, or chronic tension. You call it energy blocks. You call it soul contracts. You call it lessons. Sometimes those words are accurate, but sometimes they are spiritual wallpaper over a crack in the foundation. You may notice patterns repeating. Different faces, same dynamics. Different jobs, same emptiness. Different lovers, same ache. And you wonder, how is this still happening? I meditate, I journal, I trust the universe. Why does it still hurt? Because truthfully, you haven't been healing. You've been decorating your cage. You've swapped out old beliefs for prettier ones, but the structure is the same. Certain parts of me are allowed, other parts are not. Before, you may have exiled your sensitivity to survive. Now you exile your rage, your grief, your jealousy, your shame, all in the name of being spiritual. But your soul is not interested in being spiritual. It is interested in being whole. Wholeness does not mean you only feel pleasant things. Wholeness means nothing inside you is banished. Alan Watts used to say that we cannot have up without down, in without out, light without dark. They imply one another. We live in a universe of polarity. To try to cling only to the light while denying the dark is to split reality in half. You've done that inside yourself. You call one half your higher self, loving, wise, peaceful. You call the other half your wounds, your ego, your shadow, something to transcend, fix, purge, override. But the more violently you push your pain away in the name of purity, the more power it gains underground. Spiritual bypassing is not just a mistake, it's a quiet form of self-abandonment dressed up as enlightenment. You leave yourself in your most tender moments, then wonder why you feel so empty. Think of someone you love, a child, a dear friend, an animal. If they came to you trembling, confused, heartbroken, would you sit them down and say, "Stop being so low vibe, just focus on the positive. None of this is real anyway"? Of course not. You would hold them, you would listen, you would let them cry, rage, shake. You would not rush them toward a lesson. You would not demand that they be wise while they are still bleeding. Why do you do to yourself what you would never do to someone you genuinely love? You tell yourself you're being spiritual. In truth, you are being impatient with your own humanity.
A warm, engaging, and conversational tone. Here is the strange paradox. Spirituality becomes truly alive the moment you stop using it to avoid your pain. Meditation stops being a numbing chamber and becomes a space where your heart can actually speak. Breathwork stops being a way to chase a high and becomes a way to stay with sensations you once ran from. Teachings about non-attachment stop being an excuse to detach from life and become an invitation to love without clinging. The problem is not that you found spirituality. The problem is that your ego turned it into another escape route. The ego doesn't care if you escape into work, relationships, substances, or mantras. It just doesn't want you to feel directly, because feeling directly threatens the whole structure. What happens if you actually let yourself feel your grief without spiritual commentary? What happens if, instead of saying, "It's all an illusion," you admit, "My chest hurts as if it's breaking. I feel abandoned. I feel small. I feel scared"? What happens if, instead of, "I forgive them, it's all love," you allow yourself to say, "I feel furious about how I was treated. Something in me says, this was not okay"? What happens if, instead of auto-correcting your thoughts to stay positive, you sit with the raw thought itself and ask, "What truth is this pain trying to show me?" You're afraid that if you open that door, you'll drown, that the pain will consume you, that you'll lose your spiritual progress. But here's the quiet secret. The pain you're avoiding is often smaller than the effort it takes to avoid it. Like a child locked in a basement, it doesn't need you to give it a lecture on non-duality. It needs you to open the door, to sit down, to feel with it, to let the wave move through instead of holding it frozen in your chest for years. When you finally do this, something astonishing happens. Your spiritual insights don't vanish, they deepen. Everything is one stops being an idea you repeat and becomes an experience that includes your tears. Let go stops meaning disconnect from your humanity and starts meaning stop clenching around what already hurts. Love and light stops being a slogan and becomes the gentle warmth that remains after a storm passes through you, and you realize you are still here. You begin to see that pain is not the opposite of awakening. It is one of its passages. The point is not to seek suffering. Life will offer enough of it on its own. The point is to stop pretending that a spiritual vocabulary exempts you from feeling it. You can chant and still be heartbroken. You can meditate and still be triggered. You can understand the nature of consciousness and still feel like you're going to fall apart when an old wound is touched. That doesn't mean you are failing. It means you are alive. Waking up is not about becoming untouchable.
It's about becoming permeable, less armored, less defended, less obsessed with maintaining a spiritual image, more willing to be honest with yourself. There is profound dignity in saying, "Yes, I see that this is all a cosmic dance, a passing show, a play of forms, and also, right now, this hurts like hell." That "and also" is where your humanity and your divinity sit at the same table. So, how do you stop using spirituality to escape your pain? You start with one simple commitment: no more lying to yourself about how you feel. If you are angry, you admit you are angry. If you are ashamed, you admit you are ashamed. If you are jealous, you admit you are jealous. If you are grieving, you admit you are grieving. You can still bring awareness to it. You can still inquire, explore, soften, and transform. But you don't skip the part where you acknowledge it. You stop forcing your heart to speak in high consciousness language. You allow it to speak in cries, in confusion, in silence if it must. You use your spiritual tools to support the feeling, not to erase it. You might sit in meditation and say inwardly, "I welcome what is here, even if I don't understand it." You might breathe with your sadness instead of trying to rise above it. You might journal without censoring yourself, letting messy, unflattering truth spill onto the page. And perhaps most importantly, you stop judging yourself for not being more advanced than this. One of the cruelest tricks of spiritual ego is the belief that if you were truly awakened, you wouldn't feel this way. That is nonsense. Even the most awake beings cried, raged, doubted. They felt life fully. The difference is, they didn't run from those feelings, and they didn't build their identity out of them. They allowed the weather to pass through the sky of their being. You are learning to do the same. There will be days you succeed, and days you fall back into bypassing. You will notice yourself reaching for the comfort of a spiritual quote instead of admitting you're hurt. You will notice yourself jumping to lessons when you haven't actually faced the wound. That's okay. The practice is simply this: catch it a little sooner each time. Bring a little more honesty each time. Offer yourself a little more compassion each time. You are not less spiritual for feeling deeply. You are not failing the path because you still carry unresolved pain. You are not behind because you cannot stay in a constant state of bliss. You are a human being in the middle of remembering that your wholeness was never contingent on perfection. In the end, the warning is not, "Don't be spiritual." The warning is, "Don't use spirituality as a prettier prison." A warm, engaging, and conversational tone. Let it be what it was always meant to be. Not an escape from yourself, but a way of coming home to yourself so completely that nothing inside you has to hide, not even your pain. There's another layer to all of this that's easy to miss. It's not just that you use spirituality to escape your own pain. You also start using it to manage other people's pain. You become the wise one, the calm one, the one who always has a spiritual answer ready. Someone is hurting, and before they've even finished their sentence, you want to give them a perspective that will make it all okay. It's just your ego. It's a soul lesson. You attracted this to heal. On a higher level, you chose this. And maybe there is a grain of truth in some of those phrases, but watch the impulse behind them. Are you really trying to help? Or are you trying to get away from the discomfort that rises in you when someone else is in pain? Because their pain touches your own. Their anger stirs your own anger. Their grief vibrates the string of your own grief. Their confusion reminds you of the unresolved questions inside you. So instead of sitting there with them, naked in that shared human vulnerability, you reach for a spiritual explanation like a fire extinguisher. You cool it down, you tidy it up, you place it neatly inside a cosmic framework. And in doing so, you may unintentionally abandon them in the very moment they needed your raw presence the most. You know what it feels like, because it has been done to you. You've tried to express your hurt only to be told, "Don't be so negative." You've opened up about your fear only to hear, "Just trust the universe." You've spoken about your trauma only to be met with, "Your soul chose this to grow." Those words may have some place in the big picture, but when used too soon, they land like a slap. What you really wanted was not an explanation, but a connection. Not a lesson, but a witness. Someone to say, "I hear you. This hurts. I won't leave just because it's uncomfortable." This is where spiritual bypassing becomes relational bypassing. You don't just use it to escape yourself, you use it to avoid intimacy. Because true intimacy requires that you stand in the full heat of another person's experience without fleeing into concepts. It asks you to feel with them, without trying to fix them. To let their pain exist in the same room as your love without rushing to close the gap. That is much harder than quoting a teacher or a book. It requires you to bring your heart, not just your philosophy. And it confronts you with a simple, radical truth. All the spiritual insight in the world is meaningless if it cannot translate into compassion. Alan Watts spoke often about life as a dance, a play, a drama, but he never meant that as a way to trivialize the experience of the characters. He meant it as a reminder that the one playing all these roles is something deeper, something timeless. The point is not to stand in the audience judging the actors for taking their parts too seriously. The point is to realize that you are the actors and the audience and the stage itself. From that view, you don't have to deny the tears just because you know the story is a play. You can feel them fully and somehow still remember that behind them there is something unbreakable watching. True spirituality is wide enough to hold both. So what does it look like to stop using spirituality as an escape and start using it as a way of coming closer to life? It begins with the smallest, most ordinary moments. Not in the peak experiences, not in the visions, not in the highs, but in the quiet places where your patterns show up. Notice the moment you instinctively reach for a spiritual phrase to shut down a feeling. You are about to cry, and your mind says, "This is just ego." Pause. Let the cry come anyway. You remember something painful, and you're about to override it with, "Everything happens for a reason." Pause. Let yourself admit, "This hurt me," before you search for reasons. You feel anger rising, and you're about to tell yourself, "Anger is low vibration." Pause. Notice what your anger is trying to protect. Notice the boundary it is pointing to. You don't have to act it out destructively, you don't have to dump it on others, but you do have to let it exist, at least long enough to hear what it's saying. Spirituality doesn't ask you to deny your weather, it invites you to discover the sky. But you cannot discover the sky by pretending the storm isn't there. You discover it by realizing the sky is wide enough for all of it. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is not to sit in perfect lotus posture, but to lie on the floor and sob like a child until your chest stops shaking. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to admit, "I am furious," and let that truth unclench your jaw, loosen your stomach, thaw the numbness in your heart. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to say to someone, "What you did was not okay," instead of plastering over the wound with, "I forgive you," before you've even acknowledged the cut. Your body is not less sacred than your thoughts. Your nervous system is not less spiritual than your visions. The tightness in your throat is not less holy than your mantras. All of it is the path. There is also the matter of the shadow, the Jungian side of this. The parts of you that don't fit your spiritual self-image don't disappear. They go underground. You exile your jealousy, but it leaks out as subtle competitiveness wrapped in helpful advice. You exile your rage, but it seeps through as passive aggression and cold detachment. You exile your fear, but it clings to your spiritual practices, turning them into strict rituals you're terrified of breaking. And then you call this discipline. You see, the more idealized your spiritual persona becomes, the more distorted your shadow becomes. The brighter the mask, the darker the basement. If your spirituality does not include a relationship with your shadow, it is fragile. It will crack under pressure. It will crumble when life doesn't match your vision board. It will collapse the first time a real crisis hits, and your mantras don't erase the raw animal terror in your gut. That's when you might feel betrayed by the path. You told me to trust, to surrender, to believe in love. Why do I feel like this? Why didn't this protect me? But spirituality was never meant to protect you from feeling. It was meant to give you the capacity to feel without losing yourself. The real warning is not "don't go spiritual." It's "don't turn spirituality into a disguise." Because life will tear at that disguise again and again until you remember that what you are does not need polishing. This doesn't mean the practices are useless, far from it. Meditation can help you see that your thoughts are not the ultimate authority. Breathwork can help you stay present when a wave of feeling rises that once would have drowned you. Prayer can soften your resistance to what is. Contemplation can bring understanding to patterns that once seemed senseless. But they must be in service of truth, not avoidance. Ask yourself, gently, in any given moment, is this practice bringing me closer to what is real in me, or helping me escape it? Am I meditating to meet myself or to avoid myself? Am I chanting to open my heart or to shut it up? Am I learning more concepts because I'm curious about life or because I'm afraid to actually live it? Be ruthlessly honest, but also tender. You don't need to shame yourself for the ways you've bypassed. You were doing the best you knew how, with the tools and awareness you had. Sometimes you needed to float above the pain for a while, just to survive. There is no guilt in that. The invitation now is different. You're strong enough to come back down, to walk into the basement with a lantern instead of locking the door and pretending the house is complete, to sit on the floor with the parts of you you've called unspiritual, the scared one, the angry one, the needy one, the bitter one, and say, I don't want to exile you anymore. Tell me your story. You may learn that your anger was never against life, but against the ways you were taught to betray yourself. You may learn that your grief is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of how deeply you can love. You may learn that your fear is not an enemy, but a younger part of you that never had a hand to hold. And then, suddenly, all those spiritual ideas, oneness, compassion, unconditional love, stop being slogans and start being lived. Oneness is not just recognizing that we are all one in some cosmic sense, it's recognizing that all the parts of you are one. The enlightened seeking part and the binge-watching part, the kind part and the cruel part, the serene meditator and the panicked, shaking child. Compassion is not just sending love to the world, it's sending love into the corners of your own being that you've been at war with for years. Unconditional love is not just a romantic ideal, it's the decision, day after day, to stop making your worth conditional on how spiritual you appear. This is what makes spirituality real. Not how many books you've read, not how many retreats you've gone on, not how many spiritual people approve of you, but how honestly you can say, I am no longer using this to run from myself. I am using it to sit more fully in my own life. There will still be pain. There will still be loss. There will still be days when the best you can do is breathe in and out and whisper, I don't know. That's okay. In fact, that humility is far closer to awakening than any grand feeling of, I have transcended. You are not here to become a flawless light being floating above the mess. You are here to discover that the light has always included the mess. The heartbreak, the rage, the doubt, the longing, they are not obstacles to your path. They are the path. Spirituality, at its most honest, is not a ladder you climb to escape being human. It is a way of bowing so deeply into your humanity that eventually you fall through it into something vast and quiet and free. And ironically, that something was with you the whole time, even when you were busy using spiritual ideas to avoid your own heart. You are closer now. Not because your life looks perfect, but because you are finally willing to stop hiding behind perfection. You are turning toward the very things you once tried to bypass. And that, quietly, humbly, without fanfare, is what real awakening looks like. There is something quietly heroic about the fact that you are even here, listening to this, because most people never get to this point. Most people never question the way they use their beliefs. They simply trade one anesthetic for another. If spirituality makes them feel safe, they cling to it blindly. If it lets them avoid the rawness of their own heart, they use it like a drug. You are doing something different. You are asking, am I being honest with myself? Am I using this to wake up or to stay asleep in a prettier dream? That question already places you on a different path. It means you have noticed the split inside you, the part that wants to be pure, calm, enlightened, and the part that is messy, aching, human. For a long time, you thought the spiritual path was about choosing one and killing off the other. Now you are beginning to see that the real path is about letting them meet. The image you had of awakening might have looked like this. You become untouchable. Nothing bothers you. You feel only peace. You float above drama. You move through life like a monk in a movie, calm eyes and gentle smile, always saying the perfect thing. Real awakening is far less glamorous and far more intimate. It looks like this. You are triggered, again, by something you thought you were over. Instead of shaming yourself for it, you sit down and feel the burn in your chest. You breathe through the shaking. You let the old story rise. You listen to the younger you who never got to speak. You cry. You rage. You soften. You don't post about it. You don't turn it into a performance. You don't need anyone to see it to make it real. You are with yourself in a way you never were before. And maybe, afterward, your spiritual understanding comes in and offers a wider view. Yes, this too is transient. Yes, this too is a rising in consciousness. But it comes after the feeling, not instead of it. That order matters, because when truth comes after feeling, it lands in the body. It's not just an idea. It becomes integrated, woven into your muscles, your breath, your nervous system. You don't have to convince yourself you've healed. You feel different. You are no longer talking over your pain. You are conversing with it. This is how spirituality and psychology can dance together instead of fighting. Jung spoke of making the unconscious conscious. Watts spoke of seeing through the illusion of the separate self. Both, in different ways, were pointing to the same movement. To stop being run by what you will not look at. To stop being a puppet of patterns you never chose. To realize that what you are is deeper than all of it. But here is the paradox. You don't find that depth by skipping over the patterns. You find it by walking right through them, by feeling your abandonment issues without drowning in them, by seeing your projections without shaming yourself for having them, by owning your jealousy, envy, hatred, and fear without turning them into identity. You become like a good host. Every feeling is allowed to knock on the door. None of them get to take over the house, but none of them are banished to the street either. They come in, they're seen, they're heard, and then eventually they leave. You begin to trust this process. You see that no wave is permanent. You learn, slowly, that you can survive your own inner weather without dissociating into spiritual clouds. The more you do this, the less tempting bypassing becomes, because you start to notice something. The feelings you were most afraid of are not bottomless pits. They crest and fall. They come and go. What hurts most is not the feeling itself, but the constant effort to suppress it. Avoidance is a much heavier burden than emotion. The part of you that used spirituality to escape was trying to protect you. It didn't trust your capacity to feel. It thought, if we open this door, we'll never stop crying. If we touch this rage, we'll destroy everything. If we admit this hurt, it will crush us. Now, with each wave you allow, that protective part begins to see. I was wrong. We can feel this and still exist. We can feel this and not explode. We can feel this and, somehow, be more whole afterward. That is how inner trust is rebuilt. You no longer need to use spiritual language as armor. You can use it as a bridge. Instead of, it's all an illusion, being a way to erase your grief, it becomes a way to bow to it, to feel it fully and still know there is something larger holding it. Instead of let go being a command to stop caring, it becomes an invitation to stop clenching around what you cannot control. Instead of choose love being a demand to smile over your hurt, it becomes the gentle choice to remain open to life even when it has disappointed you. You stop forcing yourself to jump to the conclusion of the story. You allow yourself to live the chapters. And then, at some point, you notice a shift in how you view other people as well.
You no longer need them to be perfectly healed for you to feel safe. You no longer hover above them in spiritual superiority, diagnosing their wounds from a distance. You recognize your own patterns in theirs, your own pain in their outbursts. Compassion stops being a concept and becomes a reflex. You don't rush to fix them. You don't weaponize higher truths against them. You let them be human in front of you, because you have finally allowed yourself to be human in front of you.
There is a deep relief in this, in not having to be the enlightened one, the strong one, the teacher, the healed one all the time. In remembering that you too are allowed to be in process, that you can hold wisdom in one hand and uncertainty in the other, that you can talk about unity consciousness in the morning and still lose your temper in the afternoon, that your value is not shredded every time you fall back into an old pattern. You begin to see that the spiritual path is not a straight line up a mountain. It is more like a spiral. You circle the same themes again and again: abandonment, worth, control, trust. Each time you come back to them, you see them a little more clearly. You react a little less automatically. You bring a little more presence, a little more kindness. From the outside, it might look like, I'm still dealing with the same stuff, I must be failing. From the inside, you can feel, yes, it's the same pattern, but I'm meeting it differently. I'm less fused with it. I'm more honest. I'm more spacious. That is what growth actually looks like. Sometimes your pain will still overwhelm you. You will forget everything you've learned. You will spiral, get lost in old stories, say things you don't mean, ghost your practices, close your heart. Let that be okay. What matters is not that you never leave yourself again. What matters is that you know how to come back. The old you might have spent weeks or months in a bypassing loop or a self-destruction loop. The newer you begins to catch it sooner. You wake up one day and realize, I've been running from this feeling again. You sit down, you breathe, you pick up one tool, not to erase the feeling, but to support your capacity to be with it. And in that moment, you are no longer escaping, you are relating. This is the subtle, radical shift. You go from using spirituality to get away from your experience to using spirituality to be more intimate with your experience. The path becomes less about escaping what is and more about saying a deeper yes to what is here. Yes, this grief. Yes, this confusion. Yes, this anger. Yes, this inexplicable joy that sometimes bubbles up in the middle of all the mess. Not a resigned yes, not a passive yes, but a clear, conscious yes to participating in your own life. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, a quieter recognition dawns. The thing in you that is able to witness all of this, the bypassing, the breakthroughs, the relapses, the healing, is untouched. It watched you when you ran from your pain. It watches you now as you learn to walk toward it. It is present in the meditation hall and in the breakdown on the bathroom floor. It doesn't get more or less worthy based on how well you do the work. It doesn't keep score. It simply is. Call it awareness, consciousness, the self, God, the Tao. Names do not matter as much as the felt sense that there is something in you that is not improved by spiritual tricks, nor damaged by emotional storms. Spirituality, when it is no longer used as an escape, becomes a way of resting as that, not as a way of avoiding your humanity, but as a way of holding it. You are still hurt, you are still healing, you are still learning, but underneath there is a stillness that does not flinch, and the more you trust that stillness, the less frightened you are of your own depths. You realize you can walk into the darkest room inside you with a candle and not be destroyed. You do not have to seal those rooms off with elaborate spiritual locks anymore. So if you find yourself tempted in the future to float above your pain with a quote, a mantra, or a concept, remember this: you are strong enough now to feel. You have tools. You have awareness. You have a heart that is learning how to stay open without being naive. Your spirituality is no longer a hiding place. It is a home base, a place you can return to after you've walked through the fire, not a place you run to so you never have to feel the heat. Let your practices support your courage, not replace it. Let your insights deepen your humanity, not erase it. Let your beliefs bend around your truth, not the other way around. Most of all, let your path be wide enough to include every part of you: the wise one, the wounded one, the child, the skeptic, the mystic, the angry, tired, silly, complicated human that you are. Nothing needs to be left outside, because the real awakening is not when you finally stop feeling pain. It's when you stop abandoning yourself whenever pain arises. From that place, the warning is no longer a threat. It's a reminder. You do not need to use spirituality to escape your pain. You can use it to walk hand in hand with your pain all the way back to the place in you that was never broken to begin with.